Okay, let's jump into discussing more about youth strength training. So I get this question a lot: is strength training safe for young athletes? And the short answer is yes, it is. We just got done talking about all of the benefits for strength training that do not involve muscle hypertrophy. And so we want to take advantage of all of those different aspects of strength training and incorporate them into younger individuals and younger athletes. So I wanted to bring your attention to a simple clinical report provided by the American Academy of Pediatrics that talks about resistance training for children and adolescents. I'll be referencing many different aspects of this clinical report within this talk to help you get a better understanding of why young children and adolescents are capable of doing strength training activities. So substantial research supports that children can gain a variety of fitness benefits from resistance training. And we talked about that in the earlier section. It's important that these strength training programs are appropriately designed, and when they are, there is no apparent negative effect on linear growth or growth plate health. So I will go even further to say that it's really a myth that growth plates are damaged from strength training. If strength training is done appropriately and age specific, there is no indication that it will harm growth or your growth plates. When it's done properly, injury rates with strength training or resistance training are actually lower than in other sports or general play. These are the key steps that you need to be aware of when designing a strength training program for your child or for a youth athlete. Adequate supervision. It needs to be technique driven. So we're not focusing on how much weight you can lift. We're not focusing on the amount of reps that you can do. We're focusing on how much or how well you can do a particular exercise. And then educated progression, right? You do not progress on to the next exercise if you cannot do it with proper technique and you don't have a full understanding of all of the portions of that motion. It is not just, hey, I was able to lift a certain weight, let's bump you up or make this harder. It is, I have a good understanding of the technique, I have a good understanding of the proper movement patterns, and therefore I can move on to something a little bit more challenging. That's where it's really important to rely on more than just age. Relying on age is just an outdated and flawed understanding of when to start youth strength training. The focus for strength training should be directed to the quality of movement. So what's their technique? It also needs to be focused on the maturity of the athlete, right? So you may have a mature 10 or 11-year-old who has good quality movements in their strength training who can be progressed up. And then you may have a 13-year-old who has very poor quality movements and poor maturity that really just needs to be focusing on body weights at this time. And then the progression should be based on what their competency is in strength training, what their body awareness is, their ability to perform complex movements rather than just their age and the quantity of weight. That is very, very important when designing a strength training program. The progression is based on education and competency, not based on age and the amount of weight that they can lift. So let's talk about some strength training protocols for the novice athlete. Just the basics. I know most people know this, but I just wanted to put it out there for those who don't. Maybe there's some parents watching that just aren't really familiar. So I wanted to make it straightforward and make sure we're all working from the same definitions. So a rep or a repetition is just a single complete cycle of a weightlifting exercise. So this includes both the lifting and the lowering phase. So we really think about this like when you're doing a bench press, you lift it up and then you lower it down. That's considered one rep. And then a set is a group of consecutive reps. and usually has a brief rest period in between. So for example, you might do 10 repetitions, and that's considered one set. And then when I talk about multi-joint movement, I'm talking about an exercise that works multiple muscle groups through multiple joints at the same time. So this might be, an example is a squat, a deadlift, a bench press, an upright row. So something where it's not just like a simple bicep curl, but there's multiple joints, multiple muscles involved in that movement. And then a 1 rep max is basically the amount of weight that you can lift for one single repetition of an exercise. So that's the definition of a 1 rep max. When we're creating a protocol for a young athlete, again, we want to ensure who is teaching the athlete, their qualifications, and their philosophy. I want to go on a small tangent here to just explain that it's not ideal for you to limit a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old athlete from doing any strength training activities and then send them off to high school to develop strength training techniques with someone who may not know what they're talking about, may not be giving good advice, may not have a good philosophy. So think about this. In any other athlete, in any other sport, you would not wait until they are a teenager or in high school to develop those functional movements. We want to use these younger ages to develop functional movements so they understand what they're doing, they understand the proper movements, and then as they get to that high school level, they're already very familiar with these movements, and then they can start to push weight and work on hypertrophy at that time. Keep in mind, a lot of times the coaching staff and volunteers at a particular school may not have formal training in understanding how to progress an athlete, and they may be using education that's outdated or experience from when they were a child, and those things need to be vetted before you start a strength training program. You really want to begin with 1 to 2 sets of a weight and usually shoot for about 8 to 12 reps. Generally speaking, this is about 60% of your 1 rep max, but we're really not going to focus on doing a 1 rep max this early on in your learning process. So really shoot for about 1 to 2 sets of 8 to 12 reps to just get your form right, and this will definitely provide some strength gains as well. Multiple joint exercises require excellent technique. So you may want to drop down to where you're doing a 3 to 5 rep set for something like a squat, for something like a deadlift, to develop those motor skills over time. And you can start with just no weight or using a broomstick to develop those motor skills. Additionally, as you develop those skills, then you want to progress to this general, more well-known kind of 2 to 4 sets. And usually that's going to be about 80% of your 1 rep max. But generally you want to get to about 8 to 10 reps per each of those sets. And then the principle is this progressive overload, right? So you want to try to make it a little bit harder each time so that your body has to undergo all of that neuromuscular adaptation, and then you get the gains that you're looking for. If it's not harder, if it's not more challenging, then the body becomes stale in its progression and you don't get that adaptation over time. This is something that I want to keep in mind as we're teaching young athletes to strength train. Having someone getting in the gym and doing the same exercises over and over is very stale and limiting for a young athlete. The concept that we want to use when we're teaching young athletes how to strength train is deliberate play. Now, I put play in quotes because we don't want you playing around in the weight room, but we want to make it very motivating and fun. So a deliberate play is an exercise program that's intentionally designed to incorporate games and challenges that are perceived as fun rather than just repetitive skills over and over. Now, the benefit is that it includes increased motivation and enjoyment. Functional strength, so skills development where they're working together with another athlete. Diverse motor skill development. So all of those things are done through deliberate play. So let me give you an example of that. Strength-based games, so an obstacle course. A personal example is I tried to have my kids out practicing soccer, passing the ball back and forth, did not want to do it. I changed it up. I created an obstacle course where they had to kick the ball between a certain area. They had to run up the slide down the slide, do a push-up. It was game-changing. So changing up a exercise program to fit the interest and motivation for the child is key to developing a strength training program. Additionally, creating a partner workout or a challenge within the team where two partners have to work together to do a circuit in a certain amount of time, and their technique is critiqued by the other athletes. Whatever you can do to make it fun and enjoyable, that's what's going to teach longevity, and that's what's going to keep an athlete motivated for years to come.